Hello and welcome to Accenture's Insurance News Analysis with me, Natalie de Freitas, and delighted to be joined by Kenneth, Saldanha, Accenture's Global Lead for Insurance. Kenneth, I thought we'd open by talking about a really serious issue within the insurance industry and, of course, around the world. This month, insurers have responded to the Black Lives Matter movement with carriers lending their support to fight racism and to expand the representation of diverse talent across all levels in their organisation. I wanted to get your personal take on how the insurance industry has responded and how it intends to become more inclusive.
It's obviously, to me, a deeply human issue above all else, right? Insurance as a sector is, I think, where everyone else is, in that they've recognized and want to respond to this first and foremost as kind of fellow human beings, and then maybe secondarily as an industry or a sector, right? But I think the insurance companies we work with, certainly our perspective on insurance is that eventually insurance is all around experience. It's the experience that of having someone support you through a very difficult event. And so in that light, insurance companies are keenly aware of the need to actually be by their customers' sides when things go wrong. So I think by virtue of that experience focus, insurance companies do feel that they have to be able to reflect the lives and experience of their customers in everything that they do. I think the place where they are actively stepping up into leading with how they represent the human population around them is in places that aren't always seen in the market, and that would be places like the back office functions, the more technical functions, and then certainly on the leadership side, right? That's a place where insurance companies, I think, like every other company that's aware of what's played out around us, is going to be very actively pushing to make sure that representation shows up, just driven by a push internally at the company, even if it's not immediately visible to customers in how they interact, but it will absolutely be visible over time in how the company conducts itself.
I want to move on to obviously the next huge issue for insurers at the moment and ask you about the COVID-19 crisis. We're entering vacation season. Lockdown restrictions are easing around the world. I mean, many countries, particularly in Europe, confirming air bridge agreements to kickstart the tourism industry. We're looking at insurers again. I wanted to get your views on how travel insurers are adjusting. I mean, we're reading stories that holiday makers now may have to take on risks themselves, while others are providing cover for medical treatment, say, if they catch COVID on holiday. I mean, how quickly do you think insurers are responding and building new capabilities on this kind of ever-changing scenario?
There's all the questions around what's covered based on products and policies that have already been sold, versus what are the new policies or the new ways in which companies are selling products. So let's touch on the first one, which is, to your point around there are travel policies out there right now, and typically travel is viewed as a very simple product, right? You sort of buy your travel policy, and if something, you miss your flight, you miss your connection, they lose your bags. It's a very simple, buy this policy, this goes wrong, you get compensated. And now, of course, that coverage issue gets enormously complicated when you start to layer in COVID into that. At the very simplest level, there are some people who literally can't travel, make their trips because the travel is no longer allowed. And the question then starts to arise, what's covered, right? Fundamentally, is something that was initially purchased simply to take care of missed connections and lost bags, does that really now relate to an entire trip being canceled when you can't enter the country, or you can go to the country, but you're required to quarantine for a while? So I think the interpretation of what these existing products really cover at this point is really up in the air, and insurers are working very closely with regulators, and unfortunately they have to do it, in some places state by state, certainly country by country, to determine what the coverage really means at this point for what used to be a simple product. I think what you're seeing looking forward is that insurers are recognizing that, in fact, their policy language, their product language has to change and has to be much more tightly describing what it is that they intend to cover, simply because a travel flight is no longer as simple as a travel flight used to be, pre-COVID, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of this responsiveness to saying we need to be very clear on what the products really cover and what they do, and as well as I think there's going to be some uncomfortable legal and regulatory debates around what do the existing products actually cover.
Challenges are also coming to insurers in the face of disruption from insurtech competition. So a few days ago, we saw Lemonade, the insurtech that uses AI and machine learning to replace brokers effectively. They raised $319 million in US initial public offering. I mean, they say they've got more than 700,000 customers, and that nearly 3/4 of them are under 35. While it's still a small player, I mean, what's your take on how insurers and brokers specifically, how are they going to react to this level of confidence from investors?
So Lemonade is a fascinating story, right? And we're fortunate to have the Chief Underwriting Officer of Lemonade, John Peters, on Accenture's Insurance Innovation Board. He's joined us for some of our meetings, and it's someone we've known well, and it's always fun to have him in those meetings. Lemonade opened at $29 a share. It's now trading at $80 a share. To your point, there's a lot of confidence around Lemonade in the market, and it's certainly been an organization, a company that has created enormous buzz in the insurance industry. Not just, you mentioned the AI ML side of their story, but they've actually created a lot of interesting disruption across a lot of dimensions. Beginning with their you choose an affiliation or a cause, and profitability from your group if is sent to that cause, right? So it creates a doing social good through insurance, and it really takes away this notion that, well, insurance companies just sell me a product and then I don't use it and they take the profits away, right? Very few people actually understand that most insurance companies have actually sort of largely built their economics around what portion of the premium do they have to pay back in claims, and that's how the economics are fundamentally balanced. But Lemonade's done a phenomenal job of actually creating a position that says we're not just here profiteering on what happens with your losses, because if we do actually generate an underwriting profit, it'll go to the cause that you actually like, right? And that's been a very powerful message for a millennial population, from our last rounds of customer research, for a millennial population in particular that really wants to see social good come out of the insurance effort.
The FT wrote a feature this month on how insurers have changed the way they cover their business customers in light of virtual working, and particularly now employee liability is being moved from sort of unoccupied office buildings into the home. Boundaries are really being blurred. I mean, the FT claim virtual working could be the big opportunity for disruptors to grab market share. I mean, how might incumbent insurers respond, and will they reinvent themselves?
Yeah, I think so. Natalie, this is the flip side of the travel insurance conversation we just had, right? Whereas the travel insurance question about what's covered and what are the losses going to be are around the claims and the payment side of the equation. The question of how work from home and how things are going to change for different ways of working starts to get at the premium base and the top line side, right? What are we actually going to sell in terms of products, and what coverages are we actually providing? Now, you may be in one of the customers who in the last few months has actually seen this play out on the auto insurance side. As work from home took over and people just started the daily commute went away, driving just went down in even from the shelter in place rules. Most auto insurers came back and started to pay rebates to their customers because the loss experience is just fundamentally different when you actually are operating within a shelter-in-place, no work, commute, etc., on the roads. So, auto insurers saw their claims experience really start to drop. The usage was clearly dropping, and they reflected that back to customers in top line and premium. The FT article talked about, the commercial space, right, and the offices that are now sitting vacant. Now, interestingly, almost as a sidebar, unoccupied buildings tend to be higher risk and more expensive. And so most insurance policies actually have a fixed amount of time that a building can be vacant before the policy no longer holds. And as insurers have now started to look at the office buildings and the length of time that work from home has actually played out, they have to change those policies, and they have to change that coverage to reflect the realities of how people are working. Will it be an opportunity in terms of either new attackers or for the incumbents? I mean, absolutely, right? You think about so just to sort of as a facetious example, you have someone who's at home, who's on a Zoom call, they proceed to go, walk downstairs to grab something out of the kitchen, and they proceed to trip and fall down the stairs. They were in the middle of a work activity, they were on a conference call, they couldn't drop off it. Is that now a work comp event, right? Bit of a facetious example, but it's a real issue. And as people's work from home experience changes, so will the insurance, right? Now, given the flexibility required to actually write new products, new coverages, new language, it is always a place that then attracts new entrants to say we've created a very specialized boutique product to really address this particular issue. But I have no doubt that the incumbents are actively reviewing their policy language. In fact, that was exactly what the FT article talked about, was the rapid review of policy language and coverage that that the incumbents are heavily involved in right now. Eventually, insurance is driven by experience, right? By claims experience, by loss experience, and I have full faith that the insurers will absolutely respond with whether it's adjusted language or new products, and whether it's in incumbents making those shifts or newer boutique offerings coming into the market. But we will absolutely see new and different offers to really account for the new experience of work from home.
Kenneth, I can't help but notice I'm feeling a bit of a home from home at the moment. I'm spotting a London map behind you.
Yes. The London, yes. I actually have 4 maps. So I have a map of they're all train maps for New York, Mumbai, Paris, and London. The London one in particular is actually a gift from my son, who was actually in London on a school trip. And I'm sure for all the native London folks, they will roll their eyes, but he was at the Covent Garden London store, right? And he knows that I actually am a fan of the subway maps, and so that's a gift from my son on his school trip back. So it sits with a few other maps on my office wall.
Kenneth, as ever, a wonderful conversation, and thank you for making your time to share your insights.
Absolutely. Nice to speak with you again, Natalie. Take care in London.
Take care, Minneapolis.